Welcome to Making a Murderer, Rubberducky YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today on the RD Making a Murderer Daily MaM Reading. We're doing the CASO Investigative Reports, pages 341 through 350, part 35. Page 341. Type of activity, interview of Louis R. Vigue. Date of activity, 01/1906 at 14:01 hours. Reporting officer, Investigator Mark Wiegert. On 01/1906 at approximately 14:01 hours, I, Investigator Wiegert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, along with DCI Special Agent Tom Fassbender, did go to Louis Vigue's residence to interview him reference the Halbach homicide. Should be noted, Louis would be a police officer for the City of Two Rivers Police Department. Prior to going to Louis's residence, we did speak with Jason Schneider. For more information on the Jason Schneider interview, please see Special Agent Fassbender's report. It should also be noted that Schneider did provide Officer Vigue's name as being the officer he had spoke to about the Halbach homicide. I informed Louis that Schneider had told us they had spoken about the Avery case and was wondering what the conversation was about. Officer Vigue states he bumps into the Schneider boys when he is working third shift. He states they are out roaming the streets of Two Rivers, and he commonly bumps into them and does speak with them. Officer Vigue stated that Schneider boys were talking about being at their mom's house one night, and they were talking about the Halbach homicide and Steve Avery's arrest for that homicide. Officer Vigue states that the Schneider boys had told him they were using a Ouija board, and they said something had come up about the Ouija board. Officer Vigue stated the boys had believed that Steven Avery had been set up. According to Officer Vigue, he stated to them he does not know, it could go either way. Officer Vigue stated he did not really give them his opinion, he was just making small talk with them. He stated he told them anything is possible. Officer Vigue did tell us that he told the boys he thought, meaning Officer Vigue thought, it was ridiculous the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department would be setting Steven Avery up. That was the end of my contact with Officer Vigue. Investigation continues. Page 342. Investigator Mark Wiegert, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 343. Type of activity, interview of Doris L. Weber. Date of activity, 01/2006. Reporting officer, Investigator Mark Wiegert. On 01/2006 at approximately 10 o'clock a.m., I, Investigator Wiegert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, along with Investigator Steyer of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, went to the Doris Weber residence in the village of Mishicot. Upon arrival, we were allowed into the residence and met with Doris in the dining room area. Doris states she has known the Avery family her whole life. She stated her husband, her late husband, and Ellen Avery were drinking buddies. Doris stated she had worked at the salvage yard many years ago cleaning copper. I asked Doris to describe Steven Avery to me, to which she stated Steven was a nice kid, but she had never really seen any anger out of him. Doris stated she does not believe Steven would have done this. Doris told us Steven Avery and her son, Edward Weber, had both been in jail together. They had both broken into a bar in the Mishicot area, which they had gotten arrested for. Doris stated it was Steven who actually broke into the bar, and Edward just went along with him. I asked Doris if she had seen Steven lately prior to his arrest. Doris states she would see Steven at her daughter Candy's house in the City of Two Rivers. She also told us that Steven would sometimes bring his girlfriend Jody over to the residence. I asked her if she had ever seen marks on Jody, to which she stated she saw black and blue marks on Jody's arms and legs, and Jody said Steven had abused her. I asked Doris how many times she had seen Jody with the black and blue marks, to which she stated it was one time. Doris did tell us that she thought if anyone would have done this to the Halbach girl, it would have been Chucky because he had raped his own wife and has a temper. We asked Doris if Steven had ever talked about his blank. Doris stated Stephen had told her that he was going with blank. Doris also stated blank parents did not know about it. Doris told us on one occasion when she was over at her daughter Tammy's house when Stephen was there, Stephen told her he was having sex with blank. Doris believes this would have been right after Stephen had gotten out of prison. Doris also stated, page 344, her daughter Tammy had asked Stephen why he was sleeping with his brother's daughter. Stephen's response to her was that he liked her. At that time, we thanked Doris for her cooperation and left the residence at approximately 10:17 a.m. Investigation continues. Investigator Mark Wiegert, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 345. Type of activity, interview of Jean A. Rohr. Date of activity, 01-2006. Reporting officer, investigator Mark Wiegert. On 01-2006 at approximately 10:50 a.m., I, Investigator Wiegert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, along with Investigator Steyer of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, went to the Walmart in the city of Manitowoc to interview Jean A. Rohr, where she would be employed. Upon arrival, we did meet with Jean in the manager's office. I informed Jean that we were there to speak with her in reference to the Halbach homicide. I asked her if she had known Stephen. Jean stated she knew Stephen since they were little kids. She indicated she went to school with the Averys and in 1979 was in high school in the village of Mishkat with the Avery family. According to Jean, she had lived with Stephen Avery and his wife Lori Avery and their kids at the time, and believes that it was in 1982 or 1983. Jean described Stephen as being an okay guy, but had a temper. I asked her if she had ever seen Stephen physically abuse anybody, including Lori. She told me she would see Stephen hit Lori now and again. Jean went on to tell us that she remembers one night when Stephen and Lori had gone to Raleigh Johnson's birthday party. She remembers Stephen and Lori arriving home between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning, and they had been drinking. Jean stated when they got home, Lori went upstairs, and at that time, Stephen forced himself on her. Jean stated, "That's when I lost my virginity." Jean remembers she was 19 or 20 years old, and it was in the house where Stephen was when he had gotten arrested for the Bernstein thing. I asked Jean if she could describe it for me, to which she stated she had gotten done putting the kids to sleep and went and laid on the couch and was sleeping, and remembers hearing them walk in the house. She stated Stephen had come over by her on the couch and started fondling her. Jean states she told Stephen at that time no. According to Jean, she stated she believed Stephen thought she was his wife. At that time, Stephen put his hand over Jean's mouth and told her that if you yell or scream, there's going to be trouble. I had Jean describe what happened to her in her own words, to which she stated he put his pee-pee in my private. Jean states she told him no, and that is when he put his hand over her. Page 346. Mouth. She stated the whole incident took between 15 and 20 minutes. I asked her what she was wearing at the time. She stated she was wearing a nightgown. She went on to tell me how she remembers it very well because it was on top of her and she could hardly breathe because he was very heavy. Jean told me that was the only time he had ever done this to her. Jean went on to say how it happened. It hurt like somebody was putting a knife into her. I asked her if she had ever told anyone about it, to which she stated she had told some of her family members, but did not report it to the police because she did not want anybody to think that she was a slut. Jean stated Lori was pregnant shortly thereafter, and prior to Lori having the baby, she had made her, meaning Jean, move out of the house and go to her mom's house. Lori had made the statement she did not want Jean to be in bed with her husband while she was in the hospital. After this happened to Jean, she stated she thinks she lived there about a month or two after. I asked Jean if she had seen Stephen since he had gotten out of prison, to which she stated she would occasionally see him in Walmart, where she works. Jean stated she never went back and lived with Stephen since that incident and her leaving the house. We thanked Jean for her cooperation and ended the interview at 11:10 a.m. Investigation continues. Investigator Mark Wiegert, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 347. Type of activity, received a report from Midwest Regional Climate Center. Date of activity, 1/23/06. Reporting Officer Investigator John Dietering. Documents generated 8-page report. On Monday, 01/23/06, I, Dietering, did receive a certified 8-page report from the Midwest Regional Climate Center concerning weather information that included the day Teresa Halbach went missing. The report is comprised of data from a station in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, as well as from a site located at Austin Strobel Airport in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The original document can be located in the exhibits section of the incident. Investigation continues. Investigator John Dietering, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 348. Type of activity: interview of Jody Stachowski. Date of activity: 01/19/06. Reporting Officer Investigator John Dietering. Documents generated: none. On Thursday, 01/19/06, at 10:37 hours, Investigator Baldwin and I, Dietering, did interview Jody Stachowski, previously mentioned in this report regarding this matter. The interview took place at the Manitowoc County Jail, where Stachowski is still incarcerated. In this interview, Jody did state that Steven Avery is a controlling individual. I asked Jody if she had ever stood up for herself and told Steven no, and she stated the only time she had ever told Steven no was when she wanted to attend the stock car races and he told her she could not. She stated at that time he came home at about the same time she did. They fought and argued, and he choked her. I asked Jody if she had ever watched pornography on DirecTV with Steven, and she stated he would watch pornography, but she would sleep. She stated there were no discussions of any sexual threesomes. Jody did state she believes Steven will remain in the area if he is released on bond. Jody once again stated Steven told her that Steven had sex with his niece, blank, at least twice. She stated these are the times Steven told Jody about. Jody believed Steven was using the relationship between Jody and Steven as a cover for his relationship with blank. Jody indicated she does not believe Steven now has feelings towards blank. Investigator Baldwin and I did show Jody some correspondences between Deb Klemp and Steve Avery. The letters were of a romantic nature, and some of the letters were graphic in their sexual content. Jody did become angry about these letters, stating that some of the words Stephen wrote to Deb were actually words that Jody had written to Stephen. Jody requested copies of the letter. She was told that we would look into her request. The interview terminated at 11:20 hours, and there were the only items we learned that might have been new. Investigation continues. Page 349. Investigator John Dietering, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Page 350. Type of activity: attempted contact with Irvin Koenig. Date of activity: 01/19/06. Reporting Officer Investigator John Dietering. Document generated: none. On Thursday, 01/19/06, at 12:05 hours, Investigator Baldwin and I, Dietering, did attempt to contact the following individual at his residence: Irvin F. Koenig. We did speak with Irvin's wife, Judith A. Koenig, date of birth 12/05/62. She indicated Irvin advised her that the unit he saw parked in the Mishka area was totally different from the unit that the photos presented at the 12/06/05 preliminary hearing of Steven Avery depicted. She indicated Irvin was currently asleep and is a third shift worker. I left my business card and advised Judith to have Irvin contact me. Investigation continues. Investigator John Dietering, Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Okay, you guys, let's start on page 341 for our review. We're going to be talking to Mr. VQ here about him, who happens to be a Two Rivers Police Department police officer. And he's being interviewed by Mark Wiegert about a conversation he had with the Snyder boys, who are the gentlemen that have told Tammy Weber that they were told by a cop that Steven Avery had been set up. And according to Officer VQ, he kind of said it could go either way and that anything was possible. But he's telling the cops, well, he's playing it down to the cops, obviously. But he didn't really commit there. So I'm unsure what happened, but I don't think he was as on the fence as he led on to believe. On page 343, we're talking to Doris Weber. Now remember, this is Tammy Weber's mother. Tammy Weber is the one where Stephen and Jody go over to visit her. And then they get in a fight because Marie's there, Marie Avery, and there's a jealousy quarrel. And then Tammy ends up taking Jody home. Okay, so that's who we're talking about, is Doris Weber. Now, she says that she's known the Avery family her whole life. She even worked at the Avery salvage yard cleaning copper, and that her late husband was drinking buddies with Alan. She describes Stephen, nice kid, said he never had any anger out of him, and that her son and Edward are the two individuals that had robbed the bar, and both had served time for that. Now, she was asked, did she ever see marks on Jody? And she explains, yes, one time she saw some black and blue marks, and that Stephen had said, or Jody had said, that Stephen abused her. Now, we know that ties right back in to the incident with the choking, where Jody wanted to go to the stock car races. Stephen said no. Jody claims that he choked her and beat her. She called the cops. They came, they arrested Stephen, but she didn't have marks on her at that time and refused to press charges and wanted to go back home to him. So much for attempted murder, right? Now, Doris does go on to say, when it comes to the Halbach girl, it would have been Chucky, in her opinion, because he raped his own wife and has a temper. And then she goes on to say that her daughter Tammy had asked Stephen why he was sleeping with his brother's daughter, and Stephen responded to her that he liked her. So let's clear this up a little bit. Earl had a stepdaughter named Marie Avery, and Marie and Stephen were having a thing, and in this time frame, Doris does not believe that Earl knows, but we do know that Earl does know from other reports. In page 345, Jean Rohr. Now, Jean went to school, was about the same age as Lori and Stephen, and ended up moving in with them. She was helping with childcare. And one night, there's a birthday party, and Stephen and Lori, they come home drunk. Lori goes to bed. Stephen, he mistakes her, according to Jean, for his wife and ends up having sex with her. Now, it must have not been too tragic, because she stays on not only throughout the time that now, shortly after Lori gets pregnant, she stays on after that for quite a few months, to the point that Lori says, you're going to have to move out because I don't want you in bed with my husband while I'm in the hospital. So, again, there's a lot of promiscuity going on in these relationships. On page 348, they're talking to Jody again. She's talking about the choking again, about the stock car races and so forth. Once again, Jody talks about Marie having sex with Stephen and Stephen having a relationship. And Jody goes on to say that she thinks that her relationship with Stephen is to cover the relationship of Marie. And you're still in the relationship? I don't get this, you guys. I'm sorry, I don't. But she claims Stephen didn't have any more feelings towards Marie. And then the investigators show her a letter between somebody named Deb Klemp and Stephen, just to goat her, just to get her rolling and get her upset. On page 350, they go to interview Irvin Koenig about the vehicle he had saw, because he had went on TV and talked about it, about seeing what he thought was the Rev parked on 147 at the turnabout. But he's sleeping because, of course, he works third shift, you know. And Irvin, his wife tells them that Irvin had told her that after the preliminary hearing of Steve Avery in December the 6th, that he disagreed what he saw at Mishcot, the unit there. He said it was totally different from the unit in the photos that were presented at the preliminary hearing. Was it the color? All right, you guys. Well, we've hit a milestone. We've completed another 300, or another, but a total, I should say, of 350 pages together. And I thank you for being here with me. I enjoy having discussions with you and being able to read your comments and questions. And I appreciate you staying with me. All right, you guys, that was part 35 of our daily MaM reading. And what a wonderful week it is that we've completed 350 pages. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and that you'll join me again on the daily MaM reading next week. Also want to thank you for your support. for Brendan and Stephen and keeping them safe in the eyes of the world, because that's what you do with all your public awareness. And I want to thank you for supporting our channel as well. And with that, you guys, it's time. If you didn't do the crime, you shouldn't do the time. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you Monday.